Guild Wars 3 was accidentally announced, and there's a lot of panic. Because why should I play Guild Wars 2 if there's a sequel on the horizon? There are only two possibilities, and one is the most likely one. Either Guild Wars 3 is a completely different genre and not an MMO, or the mentioned Guild Wars 3 is actually a remaster or relaunch of Guild Wars 2. There's no reality where Guild Wars 3 can also be an MMO for the following reasons. If ArenaNet really wants to have two MMOs running at the same time, they will inevitably split the player base, which would make Guild Wars 3 not as successful as it could be, while also heavily impacting Guild Wars 2. ArenaNet would have to either shut down Guild Wars 2 entirely, which would massively tank public perception of the company and make players lose faith, or, well, make them coexist and make Guild Wars 3 as a new MMO even more risky. Even if it turns out that Guild Wars 3 is a flop, they cannot just go back to Guild Wars 2 then. The damage will already be done. Maybe the 90% is an exaggeration, but hear me out. If they really want to have two MMOs coexist, then they would need to majorly change Guild Wars 2 in order to keep it alive. Guild Wars 1 does not need other players. Everything in Guild Wars 2, however, is built around other players. Meta events, raids, strikes, fractals, PvP, and especially World vs. World need other players. Some people throw in henchmen or heroes, and while that may work for story content or maybe some easy strikes, it doesn't work for more complicated encounters without majorly investing into NPCs. NPCs can't get pathing right, and you want to tell me they will make them capable of doing greens on Serious CM? Or handkiting on Demise? And that still doesn't solve meta events or World where you need 50 players. If you have a single player control 40 NPCs, at that point Guild Wars 2 would become an RTS game. There's just no way they would invest that heavily into Guild Wars 2 to make it work solo, then risk Guild Wars 3 flopping, because then there's really no way back. The game will have changed too much. That hypothetical scenario is simply impossible. Why is there no WoW 2 or ESO 2 or Final Fantasy XIV 2? Because people play MMOs for their much longer lifetime than other games. By the time Guild Wars 3 rolls around, at least 15 years will have passed since the launch of Guild Wars 2. Making a new game will lose you a lot of players if it means that 15 years of progress are lost. There are still players refusing to play Guild Wars 2 and rather play Guild Wars 1 because of the same reason. And between Guild Wars 2 and 1 there were only 7 years. Guild Wars 3 would need to cater the same niches as Guild Wars 2 does, meaning World vs. World for example, and having World vs. World up in two games at the same time will be impossible without splitting the player base. This also means other systems would need to be vastly different to even justify a new game. The most likely scenario is that Guild Wars 3 is a remaster and relaunch of Guild Wars 2, and here's why I think that. Porting the game to another engine means you don't need to write new story and you can even use the same assets and simply modernize and upscale them using AI. Also, I kind of don't want to mention this, but two reverse engineers from the community ported the entirety of Guild Wars 2 to a different engine. This port works with the live game, meaning that they can play on a different engine with all existing players on the official game. If two reverse engineers can do this over a few months, I'm pretty sure a studio of over 300 developers can do it with the source code. All the content that is currently being developed and has been developed in the past is still going to be relevant. You could touch it up a little bit, but even if you don't, it's there and it works. ArenaNet has been putting so much work in the engine, especially in recent times. All these core systems reworks would be for nothing if they plan on abandoning the game. World Restructuring would be a system to last a few years, but has taken over 7 years to develop. They would have cancelled right away if their plan was to make a new game. These systems wouldn't really be needed if they hint at maintenance mode. On the point of Guild Wars 3 having to be different, you could simply apply this to Guild Wars 2. Streamline systems and revamp major parts of the game. Porting and remastering games can be as effective as a new game. Look at Counter-Strike 2. It's a port to a different engine and a major upgrade over CSGO. Other games have also rather remastered or upgraded their engines instead of making new games. If you market it properly, you keep both the existing playerbase and gain new players. There's also evidence to suggest a port already being the case. I recently tweeted about a developer having listed porting assets to Unreal Engine 5 among his duties for Guild Wars 2. After my callout, this was censored. Not removed, but censored. Meaning the statement in essence is correct, but it gave away too much information. And there's also other evidence hinting at a port or a remaster rather than a new game. I won't go into detail because the video is already long enough, but feel free to ask me on Twitch or Twitter. In conclusion, there's no world where Guild Wars 3 can be an MMORPG without shutting down Guild Wars 2 entirely. Given the track record of ArenaNet, I do not see this being a possibility. ArenaNet has heavily committed to Guild Wars 2, which they wouldn't have if they had planned on shutting it down. Therefore, a Guild Wars 3 cannot exist. It would kill Guild Wars 2 in the process, no matter what. Also, because people mention the name drop of Guild Wars 3, keep in mind this was said in a shareholder meeting by a businessman. It's easier to get investors by saying Guild Wars 3 or sequel than saying Guild Wars 2.5 or Remaster, because then you first have to question, okay, what does this really entail? At which point you will have lost that investor. The bottom line is, ArenaNet is reinvesting into the IP. The most likely, economically viable and player-friendly decision would be to remaster Guild Wars 2 on Unreal Engine 5.